Hi, my name is Cameron Gordan, and my presentation is on the ethics behind abortion. So this is the table of contents, what I will be going over in this presentation. First is an introduction, what is abortion. Second will be the context, the historical, social, and political context of abortion. Third will be the arguments both for and against abortion. And lastly, I'll be applying the concepts of medical ethics that we learned about earlier in the class to this moral issue. Introduction, so the definition, abortion is the termination of a pregnancy, and there's two types of abortions. There's medical abortion versus surgical abortion. Medical, you do not have to do in a healthcare setting. It is usually pills that are prescribed to you that you can take, which will end your pregnancy. But then surgical abortion is when you have to go into the healthcare clinic and have a doctor surgically terminate the pregnancy. These are performed by licensed healthcare professionals, and if you want to get the pills instead, you have to get a prescription from a licensed healthcare professional. And the decision of whether to get an abortion or not is extremely personal, and the problem at hand is that these views on abortion are so divided. Should it be legalized or should it be banned? And this moral issue, how are we going to be able to come up with a solution if the views are so divided? So just to go over the different types of abortion, first medical. Two common drugs are oral mifepristone and misoprostol, and these are taken within 7 weeks of the first day of your last period, and it takes 10 weeks to then terminate the pregnancy. And these work by causing cramping and bleeding, which empty the uterus. And again, you don't have to do this one in the healthcare clinic. You can do it at home. But it must be prescribed by a certified healthcare provider. And there are different ways you can get these pills. You can actually get them in the mail now, but more commonly it's at dispensing clinics and pharmacies. Next is surgical abortion. So these are the three common types: vacuum aspiration, dilation and curettage, and dilation and evacuation. And I put the weeks next to it, so you can get the first one between 6 and 12 weeks, the second one between 6 and 12 weeks, and the last one between 13 and 24 weeks. So these procedures are performed in a healthcare setting. So you have to go into the clinic to get these done. So why do women get an abortion? There are a lot of reasons, and they're all personal. One reason can be age. Sometimes a woman will get pregnant at a very, very young age, and they're not ready to raise another kid and have a responsibility for the other kid. Another reason could be finances. It is incredibly expensive to raise a child and also just to finance yourself and what you want to do in life, so it is very difficult to balance both. Also, pregnancy could have resulted from non-consensual sex, like rape, where the woman is not going to want to give birth to that child. Another one could be family environment. Some women are born into families that are very, very religious or strict, where if they mention that they got pregnant at such a young age or pregnant before they're married, they will be looked down upon or shunned out of their family. Another one could be fetus abnormalities, where something is wrong with the embryo, and it's either going to terminate the mother's life or the baby is going to die when it's born. So they would just terminate it before that happens. And lastly is life endangerment, if the baby's life puts the mother's life at risk. So just some historical context of this moral issue of abortion and how it's been around for a really long time. So 1973 was Roe v. Wade, where it legalized abortion in all 50 states. And then 1992 was the Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey, which redefined provisions regarding abortion rights, which was outlined in Roe v. Wade. And then since 1902 to today, it's been even more debate with pro-life versus pro-choice. So Roe v. Wade Jane Roe Norma McCorvey was 22 years old living in Texas when she became pregnant for a third time and she sought to have an abortion. And Henry Wade was the district attorney of Dallas County, Texas, and he was in charge of enforcing a state law that prohibited abortion unless it was needed to save a woman's life. And the Supreme Court concluded that this law was unconstitutional as it violated the right of women's personal privacy. So under this, the Constitution recognizes a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy by abortion, and then it was legalized, abortion was legalized in all 50 states. So the second case in 1992, in 1988 and 1989, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania created revisions to the abortion laws there. So women seeking abortions must give informed consent, minors must have parental consent, married women must inform their husbands beforehand, and clinics must provide all relevant information regarding abortions and wait 24 hours before actually performing the procedure. And so the Planned Parenthood of southeastern Pennsylvania protested the constitutionality of all these revisions. So in this decision, the Supreme Court affirmed Roe v. Wade. Women do have the right to obtain an abortion prior to fetal viability. However, it did reject some parts of Roe v. Wade, so states were allowed to pass regulations affecting the first trimester, but any regulation that imposed a substantial obstacle that prevented a woman from obtaining a legal abortion violates that woman's constitutional right to an abortion. So now to get into the ethics and the arguments for pro-life and pro-choice. So this is one very common argument for pro-life. Premise 1, a fetus is a person from the moment of conception. Premise 2, all persons have a right to life. Conclusion, therefore a fetus has a right to life. There are a lot of responses to this argument, and this is just one philosopher I found named Judith Thompson. In her writing A Defense of Abortion, she claimed that premise 1 is not valid. Her objection was, at the moment of conception, a fetus is a clump of cells, not a human being. And she offered a comparative example about the development of an acorn into an oak tree. We wouldn't classify an acorn as an oak tree, so why would we classify a fetus as a human being? So an argument for pro-choice. Premise 1, only persons have a right to life. Premise 2, a fetus is not a person. Conclusion, therefore a fetus does not have a right to life. An additional argument for pro-choice. Premise 1, factors may arise where adult human beings can choose to terminate a pregnancy, and by factors, I mean the factors I talked about in my earlier slide, like family situation, age, those factors. And then premise 2 is if factors arise where an adult human being can terminate a pregnancy, it is morally right to terminate that pregnancy. And therefore the conclusion is it is morally right to terminate that pregnancy. Again, there are objections to all of these arguments from both sides, and this is just another philosopher I read about named Don Marquis. And his objection was death harms us by depriving us of the valuable experiences that would come with our personal futures. It is wrong to kill an individual and deprive them of that future. A fetus has the same kind of personal future as a typical human being. It is therefore wrong to kill a fetus just as it is wrong to kill an adult. So that is just one objection to the pro-choice argument. So again, just to further discuss this moral issue of abortion, in Abortion and the Ways We Value Human Life, Jeffrey Raymond, an American philosopher, argued that the moral issue of abortion comes down to the way in which we value the lives of individual human beings, and he called this asymmetric value. So the value lost in destroying an existing human being is significantly greater than the value that can be gained by adding a new human being. So then he comes down to this question is, why do human beings have this certain value? And then do human fetuses really contain that same value? So ultimately he concludes that adults and human children have the fullest right to protect their lives, then infants, who still have the right but to a lesser extent, and then fetuses, who he says do not qualify at all for the right to life because they do not fit into the characteristics that make human beings human beings. So another example from the woman I talked about earlier was Judith Thompson. She compares a woman with an unwanted pregnancy to a person who has been kidnapped and connected to a famous violinist. The violinist needs to use the kidnapped person's kidneys for 9 months to survive. So the violinist has a right to life, but does not have the right to use the kidnapped person's body to stay alive. So even if a fetus has the right to life, it does not have the right to use the woman's body to stay alive. If it is okay for the kidnapped woman to unplug herself from the violinist, then it is okay for a woman with an unwanted pregnancy to have an abortion. And I included this just because I thought it was a good comparative example between abortion and some hypothetical scenario. So now I'll be applying the context of medical ethics that we talked about earlier in the class. So those are respect for autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. So first, respect for autonomy. We talked a lot about this in class. Women are autonomous individuals, and individuals with autonomy can make decisions regarding their own health. So women are competent adults, and they can make their own health decisions. And then as a doctor, you should then respect patient autonomy. And this also relates back to Kant's basic ethical idea. With women have their personal reasons for wanting an abortion, and their capacity to choose is in their own autonomy. And legalizing abortion would fulfill this principle of medical ethics. It would fulfill the principle for respect for autonomy, because women will be able to make their own decision. Secondly is beneficence. The physician should act in the best interest of the patient. So if it is in the best interest of the patient to terminate the pregnancy, then the physician should listen. And again, if abortions are legal, this principle is fulfilled, because if the woman wants to terminate the pregnancy and that's what's in their best interest, and they are allowed to do that safely, then that's the best interest for the patient. Third, non-maleficence. This is the obligation to not inflict harm on others. So this one, some people argue, is if abortion is completely legalized in all 50 states, then this would go against this one. However, I would say not exactly, because the obligation to not inflict harm is not just physical harm, but emotional harm, psychological harm. And there is a lot of psychological harm for women when they seek to get an abortion. So women should not be discredited or ignored because of their unwanted pregnancy or their choice to terminate it. And I feel if abortion was banned in certain states, this would go against this principle of medical ethics, because it would inflict harm on the woman. Lastly is justice. So there's a moral obligation for a fair distribution of health resources. And with abortion, many argue that justice is very one-sided towards the mother and then not towards the kid. However, it is also one-sided against the mother, because it depends on where you live, which state you're in. If you're in a red state, if you're in a blue state, in a red state, it's going to be harder for you to get a safer abortion. You could be penalized for it. So it's not exactly a fair distribution of this resource. And the debate is really still divided. So it hasn't fully fulfilled this principle of justice. And I think there will be a lot of conversation of whether abortion ever will, just because everyone is so split on what they think about it. So just to relate the moral issue of abortion back to today, a draft opinion was leaked about a month ago. The Supreme Court is preparing to overturn Roe v. Wade. They said it is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. And if overturned, each state will be able to choose whether to ban or restrict abortion. So like I said earlier, I think this directly goes against all the principles of medical ethics, especially respect for autonomy and beneficence. And it's clear that this will not stop abortion. It will only stop safe abortions, and therefore harm so many more pregnant women than is necessary. So ultimately, my conclusion is just that abortion will continue to be an ongoing moral issue within healthcare and politics, and the best thing to do is just stay educated and stay informed on this moral issue. And these are my resources. Thank you.